Don't miss out on the last few weeks of football action with Prize Picks, the best place to win cash while watching the playoffs. The app is simple. Pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Download the Prize Picks Daily Fantasy Sports app today and use code SPOTIFY and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code SPOTIFY on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks. Run your game. Must be present in certain states. Visit prizepicks.com for restrictions and details.
I'm 100 hour part-time jobs. I'm 100 hour part-time jobs. I've been working Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Working Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. 101. 101.
All right, here we go with riff 1.
Hello, you're listening to 101 Part-Time Jobs with me, Giles Bidder. It's where we learn from musicians and artists about how they survive in the streaming era. We all know that being an artist, going on tour, you're probably paying out your own pocket. Streaming's not going to get you that much money. This podcast is about the reality of it and the culture, because I want us to learn more about how this stuff works and feel more connected with it. That's what I like about music, is feeling a connection, and hopefully this podcast contributes to that. And on today's episode, we speak to someone who has had an interest in creating a community. When I read Stuart Braithwaite from Mogwai's book, I learned that Alex Kapranos from Franz Ferdinand had been putting on shows in Glasgow from an early age, from his early 20s, maybe even his late teens. And that kind of infectious, and I feel like we all know someone like this, infectious energy towards music and making stuff happen. Alex Kapranos was that person, and he still is. Franz Ferdinand's new album, The Human Fear, is out tomorrow, and it actually has one of my favourite Franz Ferdinand songs ever, Audacious. Alex Kapranos is behind some of the catchiest, most ubiquitous songs at indie club nights. He also produces for other bands. He's made records with the Cribs and Los Bichos, and he's a really friendly guy, as I learned in this chat. I was really excited to speak with him, and it did not disappoint. So I hope you like this episode. If you do, make sure you click subscribe wherever you're listening to this, on Spotify or Apple, and if you're able to leave us 5 stars, that would be mega. Coming up, we've got Alex Kapranos from Franz Ferdinand.
101 part-time jobs.
I loved Stuart Braithwaite's book, Spaceships Over Glasgow, and I had no idea that you'd be running shows at the 13th Note aged 18. And I'm like, oh, this makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Of course, the guy who went on to, be in millions of homes with his band, before then had multiple bands and had this energy, had this spirit of, I'm going to make things happen. What do you remember of those days? How do you remember what your perception was of booking shows, making things happen, putting out flyers?
I used to love it. Like I felt that we'd created our own universe. That was really the motivating factor. I think we wanted a world that we could be part of and that we weren't finding around about us. So like in my early to mid-teens, I started writing songs, and that was the most important thing. Then I got to a point where I felt, I want to play these live. And in the early 90s in Glasgow, you couldn't really get a gig if you were doing your own material. Like it was very hard to get a gig. Right. You could get a gig as a covers band, or if you were an established band doing your own material, like if you were on the touring circuit. But if you were starting out, then you couldn't really get a gig, because you'd go to like people that were at a venue or a bar and so say, oh yeah, we've got a band, and say, well, so what?
Yeah.
They go, well, what do you want us to do? I said, well, we want to play. And they go, well, why should we put you on? It's because we're going to be good. And they said, but you're not good at the moment, are you? and I that became the motivation behind the booking policy that I had. And the way it started, there was a guy called Jim who'd started this club in a place called the Bogglestone called the Kazoo Club, and he'd been in a band called the Hemingways, and he wanted to like have a thing where bands would come down and play, and no other bands came down apart from my band, which is called the Blisters. So we played, and we loved it because we got to play. There was nobody there. Absolutely nobody turned up for this night. It was literally us playing to this guy Jim, and he got really disheartened by it. He thought, oh, it's just not going to work. And I was just like, this is great. We got to play, and nobody told us to stop.
Yeah.
And so the next week, I got in touch with my pal Hubby, and I said, there's this place where we can play, we can hang out. And so Hubby came down, and then another friend of ours came down like the week after that. And Jim kind of lost interest. And so I said, look, I'm not really into this. Do you guys want to keep it going? So I was like, yeah, go on. And what ended up happening was it was this very much a word of mouth thing that started happening. And so like, I just started asking people that were a friend of a friend who I knew were getting a band together. And then it sort of spread very much as word of mouth as well. And there were a lot of places that would have booking policies like we just book metal, or we just book indie, or we just book folk or whatever. I didn't have a booking policy that related in any way to genre of music. It was more related to the attitude of the people that I spoke to.
Yeah.
I tried not to listen to demo tapes as well, because it became very clear to me early on that bands rarely sounded good on demos. And also on a demo, it was very hard to hear the potential of a band.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I was fascinated with more than anything else, what a band was going to become. And some of my favorite bands that came through were bands that, when they first appeared, could barely hold their instruments. But then as they played more and more of these clubs, they learned how to do it.
Yeah.
And they learned how to make something really cool. And I remember, you talk about Stuart, I remember Stuart coming, like Stuart was always good. He was always a great guitarist, but his ideas when he first came down were not formed. Like, he didn't come down with a fully formed Mogwai. The band that he first came down with was a band called Dead Cat Motorbike. And they used to do covers of, what do you call it? Like Runaway by Del Shannon. And it was kind of like a power pop sort of thing.
Okay. And he was the drummer, wasn't he?
He drummed in another band. He drummed in a band called Eska for a while.
Yeah.
That was before, and maybe kind of overlapped with Mogwai a little bit. But yeah, and we all played in each other's bands and things. But what was fascinating was seeing like how people's ideas developed, and they learned to become good, and they learned how to play. And it became a really cool scene, like a really great scene to be involved in. And it's funny because like there were some artists that did, like Stuart Murdoch came down and would play, this is before Bell and Sebastian, and play songs that ended up becoming Bell and Sebastian songs. And then other bands that went on to some degree of notoriety, like Urusai Yatsura, or Biss, there were lots of bands coming through that scene. But it was actually a lot of the bands that didn't go on to have international notoriety. Those were the ones that were kind of the most exciting in a way. Like I know Stuart talks about the band Trout in his book, and we loved that band. They were great, but for one reason or another, they never made it really much more beyond the walls of the 13th Note.
And these bands like change people's lives, don't they? And I wanted to bring this up actually. I love the book Memorial Device by David Keenan, and that's such a great way of explaining how music can become someone's life. Someone's very, in some eyes, small life in a small town in Airdrie. But as so many of us know around the world, you can live in a small town or a big city, but when you find music that you connect with, it doesn't matter where you are. You feel part of this thing. And then if it's down the road and you can see these bands in the flesh, then even better. And I love the way that identity is such a huge part of that kind of youthful spirit of starting bands, finding out who you are.
It really is. And the other thing is, like, I think it's funny you say, because I think so much of it is escapism as well. Like when you form a band, you're creating a universe for yourself, which is your fantasy version of what you want reality to be. And most of the bands that I was putting on in the 90s, they didn't come from the hip urbane parts of Glasgow. They came from the suburbs. They came from the schemes and the boring housing estates outside of Glasgow. And I think boredom has a big part to play in it. You know, like when you feel that the life around about you is mundane and not giving you the reward that you really want, then you get together with your pals and you make something that is better. And I love that. And then you come into the center and you find there's other people that think the same way as you. And I love that. I love that scene. It was, and you end up with this funny situation where your imagination kind of takes on physical form.
Yeah.
And before you know it, your imagination has become reality. And that's an astonishing experience. That's really cool.
When you become an adult, I suppose I'll re-put that, when you become someone where you're paying your own rent and you're going to work, that's a conflict or a tension of scenarios, right? 101 Part-Time Jobs is the name of this show. And, you know, everything's work. Getting up in the morning and making a cup of coffee and getting yourself in the right head frame is work as much as writing a song is, in my opinion. You know, that's where I'm coming from. So I'm interested into that time when, you know, you're putting on shows, you're starting bands. Like you say, you're what's in your head is you're making in real life. But at some point, you know, in the daytimes, presumably, you got to make some cash. And you worked as a ghoulie, didn't you, in one of Glasgow's ghost walks? Is that right?
Oh, yes, that's right. You know, I love the theme of the podcast. I think that's great because I know that I had at least 101 part-time jobs before. You know, I was 31 when our first album came out, and up until that point, there was no way I could have used my music to pay my rent. It was the opposite. It cost me money to make music, you know. And I did have numerous, and you're right. One of them was this job that I had for a while in this thing called Terror Under the Arches, which was, you know, like I guess nowadays they would call it immersive theater. But I don't think that name existed really. It was kind of like a ghost train without the train, if you can imagine that. You go into this kind of like haunted environment and led round by a mad monk and come across a mummy and various other ghouls and things. So like, and my job was to be various ghouls and also to be. The final room was these people were ushered into a cell, like a prison cell kind of thing that looked was very reminiscent of something from Silence of the Lambs. And then I would emerge wearing an orange American style prison suit, and a muzzle over my face. With a real chainsaw in my hand, buzzing away, and would sort of run for these people.
Not real. It couldn't have been real.
You know, it was a real chainsaw, but it had the chain taken off it. So like it made all the sound of like a chainsaw, like a big chainsaw like that. It's really loud and very smelly. Yeah, and it's quite a shock when you hear it and suddenly it comes through. And when you see that in the kind of like half light, you don't notice that there's not a chain on it. It's just some crazy looking fucker with a massive chainsaw. So yeah, that was my job. And when I first got the job, I couldn't believe how jammy I was. I was getting paid. I think I was getting paid £8 an hour or something like really, really serious like that. And it was my job to just do this. But like a lot of jobs, it after a while, it got really boring.
Yeah.
and you know, like, and just through repetition, like any job can get boring through repetition. And it was under the railway arches under Central Station. And I started off the job in summer, but by the time it got to December and the run up to Christmas, it got really grim. And I remember there weren't enough of the outfits, so like, I'd have to wear the outfit that the guy before me had been wearing. And I remember going in and like it had been hanging up. I remember the last day of going in, we were supposed to fill up the petrol tank of the chainsaw as well, so it was ready for the next guy. And I remember going into work and it was freezing cold, literally freezing. You could see the water was freezing inside the venue. There were icicles hanging from the arches. You could see your breath in front of you. I remember like getting the outfit, the orange jumpsuit, and like it was rigid. It was the guy's sweat from the previous shift was like saturated into this outfit that had frozen. It was rigid, like having to like break it open, put it on. And so I'm like freezing, going, God, I am so cold. I am so cold. And then hearing the group coming around and like waiting around the corner from the corner of the cell, and them coming in and kind of go, right, here we go, time to scare everybody, and pulling the jump start cable, the cord on the chainsaw, and just hearing this, and I was like, oh no, that cunt forgot to put the fucking petrol in. And so I was like, oh, what am I going to do now? I just remember like kind of running around the corner into the cell, waving this chainsaw with my frozen jumpsuit on, going, rah! And then just all these like slightly perplexed looking punters just looking at me going, are we supposed to be scared now?
Yeah. I mean, doing that in the grand scheme of things, that job is like fun compared to most other jobs. And if even if that gets boring after a few months, I mean, after school and then, you know, starting the band when you're 31, that's a long period of time to go through those different cycle of part-time jobs. And I'm interested into like how you feel, like what you're going through mentally with that stuff, and being like, you know, is this another thing? Is this a means to an end? How do I make sense of this? How do I like plan on this? I don't know, you know, maybe you want to fucking go on holiday but you can't save any money, you know, that's like that's really a human fear, right?
Yeah, you know, no, you're totally right. I didn't go on holiday for about 10 years, you know, like I very rarely went on holiday because I couldn't really afford it. It's funny though, like you talk about some jobs, and like I think of some of the jobs that I had, and theoretically they were horrible jobs. Like I worked as a dishwasher quite a lot, and people always think of that as being like certainly in the sort of like world of kitchens and stuff, like it's the lowest of the order of the kitchens, in the pecking order in the kitchen. But I actually loved the job at the time because the folk that I was working with were a good laugh. Yeah. And sometimes the jobs that were theoretically better jobs were actually unpleasant because the people I worked with were not so cool. Mm-hmm. But I do remember like working in kitchens as a dishwasher, and like having a great laugh and like a really good time, and being quite carefree. I think maybe carefree is the key word as well. Like I felt that the jobs with the least responsibility were the best. I didn't want to have a proper career in any of those jobs. Like I wanted the lack of responsibility, because then I could feel that my true responsibilities lay in what I wanted to do, which was make music. And I remember like at one point in the 90s, I was in a band called the Blisters, and Roadrunner Records wanted to put out a record, and we had to change the band name because there was a band in America called the Blisters, and they sent us a horrible letter from a lawyer, so we changed the name to the Corellia, and we released an album. And I remember signing to Roadrunner Records and thinking, that's it, that's me, I'm gonna make it. And like I remember getting an advance of, I think it was like £1,000, and I spent it all on a hi-fi and a Lambretta. The important stuff.
Yeah.
And of course we recorded the album, and I think if we sold 100 copies, that's a high estimate. Like nobody gave a damn. And I was dropped very, very quickly, and I found myself at the age of 27. The age is supposed to die, you know. Yeah. This age, you know, you're supposed to get to 27, have made a great artistic statement, and then pop your clogs. And at that point, I kind of thought, you know what, I'm never gonna do that. I'm never gonna make it in that sense. You know, I'm never gonna do the big thing. I'm probably never gonna pay my rent with my music. And that felt pretty low. You know, that was quite a low moment. I remember like being properly seriously depressed at the time. But in a way, it was actually very liberating as well. And I felt, you know what, that's it. That's fine. That's what's happened. That's the way my life's gone, and that's okay. You know, I'm cool with that. That's you know, I can't presume that I'm gonna tour the world in a private jet and play in front of thousands of people. No, that's just not my lot. That's not going to happen to me. And the interesting thing I found was that my attitude to music didn't necessarily change. I still loved making music. And in fact, I loved it more than ever before. And my desire to make music didn't change, even though I wasn't thinking I was going to get any great reward for it financially or egotistically. I just thought, I love making music. I like writing songs. I like playing with my friends. And I still wanted to structure my life in a way that was the case, that I had space. And it's something that I did give a lot of thought to at the time as well, that I wanted to order my life so that I had enough money to be comfortable, but that I wasn't selling the hours of my life for a financial reward that wasn't equal to their worth, if that makes sense.
It does, because that's what is, and I feel like I have to remind this, and me and my partner, my fiance, remind each other of this, is that like when we go to work to make someone else money, we are doing what you didn't want to do, which is we are selling our time, but there has to be enough value for us to do it, for it to be worth it.
That's it, exactly, because there's nothing wrong with selling the hours of your life to do something. That's fine, but I think what you have to do is maintain an appreciation of their value, and to know that you have to keep some of them for yourself.
Yeah,
and that you can't buy them back with the money that you make from selling them in the first place. And I did think a lot about what I needed financially and what I was prepared to give up. And I'd been on and off the dole and in and out of various jobs and things. And so I kind of thought about what I wanted as a level of comfort, and what I wanted in terms of like time to be able to spend doing the thing that I genuinely loved, which was making music. And I ended up going back to study. I went back and I learned a little bit about computers. I'm not naturally a computer mind, but I learned a little bit about how computers worked. And after that, I briefly got a job in a stationery supplies company. That was living hell. That made, remember that show, The Office? That it made the people in that show look kind of like deep and not petty in any way whatsoever. Like there was some pretty mean people working in that office. So that was theoretically a really good job, but like was actually really quite unpleasant because the people who I worked with were quite hostile. So I did that for a little while. That didn't work out. And then I went back to chefing again. But then, kind of by mistake, I ended up teaching in a college. And it happened, my mum had gone back in her 50s to Annie's Land College, like a further education college in Glasgow. And she phoned me up one night and said, "Alex, you know about computers, don't you?" I was like, yeah. And she was like, "Listen, the guy that runs my course has phoned me up. Like one of the lecturers has got ill, and they need somebody to take a computing class in the evening. Could you come in and cover for them?" I was like, I don't know how to teach it. And said, "It doesn't matter. They've got the course written out. Can you just come in and cover?" I was like, "Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, I'll go on." And she said, "You'll get 15 quid. I was like, 15 quid? No, of course, I'm coming straight in. So I came in, and the class was on Photoshop, and I'd never used Photoshop in my life before, but I looked at the notes and I could see it was quite a simple program to use. So I said, yeah, I can show them how to use that. So I went into the class and I just said to everybody in the class, "Look, I've not used this program either, but let's see if we could work it out." And so I went in and that's what we did. We worked out how to use it. It was great. And Photoshop's magic. Like I learned how to use Photoshop. It was great. And the guys in the college said, "Oh, like you're quite good at this. Do you want to come back and do some more?" And I was like, yeah, why not? And yeah. I ended up just starting off part-time, just literally doing a couple of hours a week when I was chefing. And then I got into it, and they showed me, I got a bit of training on how to teach, and I really enjoyed it. I really, really loved it. I loved the human interaction, and teaching can be a very positive experience. And I taught all sorts of fascinating people. I taught a lot of asylum seekers. So at that time in the early 2000s, there were a lot of asylum seekers arriving in Glasgow. And so I'd have these classes where the point of the class was to show people a basic skill while teaching them English at the same time. And so it would be, the theory was that, like, as you learn your woodworking, you'd be also picking up the language that goes with it.
That's a nice way to learn, isn't it?
Oh, it's brilliant. And it's the way that kids learn as well. Like if you think of like when you were a kid and you're playing, they say, "I throwed the ball." You go, "Oh, I threw the ball." Like, and that's how you learn language. It's almost like unconsciously as you're doing the tasks.
Right.
And it was a really nice method. And so I'd have these classes of students who would have been I don't know, like lawyers and doctors in the countries they'd come from, others who were completely illiterate. So it was like a huge range of fascinating people, and I loved it. I really, really loved that work at Annie's Land College. It was a great, great job. But more than anything else, I loved the freedom they gave me because, like I said, it was £15 an hour, which was, to me at the time, an inconceivable amount of money. Like, it was proper, serious money. And I worked out that I didn't need many contact hours. Like, I was working like between 18 and 20 hours a week.
Nice.
And that left me a lot of time. And it was in that time that I wasn't working at the college that a lot of the Franz Ferdinand stuff came together, and we were sort of like writing and getting our stuff together, you know.
It's amazing to find a job that it gives you something back, you know, something that you didn't expect to get back. It sounds like you got a lot of energy from being around people and people who are learning the English language or learning the language, and then you're in there, you know, receiving that energy as well. You're part of that energy.
I really did, and like I said, like all those other jobs, it wasn't really the nature of the work itself, but so as the people who were there, and my colleagues at Annie's Land College as well, they were great people, like very, very supportive. And I remember when the time came, when we were releasing Darts of Pleasure, and I had to go to the over to Malmo to record our first album. They'd offered me a full-time job. At this time, they said, "Oh yeah, like, do you want a full-time job, Alex?" So I was like, I'm actually going to give it all up because I'm going to make a record. I remember them looking at me like, "Are you out of your mind? Like, you've got a really good job here." I said, yeah, I know, I really appreciate like your kindness and I appreciate what you're doing, but I've got to take a chance here. And I think that was always important for me. I always felt like I had to have that relationship with whatever job I had, that I could, like, at the drop of the hat, walk away from it if it felt right, you know. And I think that's the difference between having a job and having a career. Like, I never wanted to have a career. I just wanted to have a job. I just wanted to pay the rent, even if I loved the job at the time. It was a job. It was a gig, you know.
Yeah.
Rather than.
How did your view on finance change over the course of the early years of Franz Ferdinand? I mean, when you're thinking about money, and 15 quid was that big amount, and you're like, okay, freedom. This is freedom money. How did that evolve with, well, making more money than that with Franz Ferdinand?
You know, there were some things that I couldn't change. Like whenever I'd had a car, it'd always been an old banger. When Franz started off, I got an old Merc, like one of these old early 80s Mercedes, and I'd saved up my cash, and I found it in the yellow paper, and it was 50 quid for this car. And it was this old estate, and we used to travel everywhere, and that, like, it was big enough to fit all of our gear in the back. And
brilliant.
And I still can't, I've never been able to buy a new car. Like, mentally, I can't do it. Like, it just seems like, oh, why would you do
they are
that?
so expensive. You know, when you walk past a garage, and even the second-hand ones, you think, that is an inconceivable amount of money, you know, when they got the numbers in the window. And I'm thinking, wow. Who can do that? Who can do that?
Why is the thing that runs through my head still? Like, and I could never understand that. That seems to be the mentality of a lot of, like, when I was working in the stationery supply company, like, everybody there, they just seemed to be like selling the hours of their life for their job to get that car. Like, that's what they just went to be working every day just to have that bloody car, which drove them into the work every day in the first place. I was like, oh man, your priorities are really wrong. And that's in no way criticizing the type of work. The type of work was fine. Like, people need stationery. It's a good service to get into the world. But like, why are you doing this? You know, like what's important in your life? You know, like. I maybe I just don't get the car thing. I don't know. That's it.
But obviously, writing songs and being in a band was something that you always, well, for as long as you remember, see value in. And so when the band started kicking off, and when those singles started to hit, and recording the album, did the way that you were approaching the work of being in a band, did your approach to that change? Did you find you were taking it more seriously, or was there maybe a funny mix of emotions because you've been doing it for so long as a hobby that you had to kind of reframe it as, okay, other people are seeing value in this now as well. Where does that leave me?
I think I've always taken it seriously. That's the thing. Even when I was doing it on my own, I first started recording with my friend Andrew when I was 14, something like that. He got one of those little Tascam 4-tracks that you have a cassette in, and I always felt serious, but at the same time having a laugh. Do you know what I mean? Like we were serious about making something good, but wanted to have a laugh while we were doing it, enjoy each other's company. And I've tried to maintain that all the time when I've been making work, making music, and doing the thing that I love. And I guess as I went on, like in the late 90s, like after I turned 27, whatever, looking for another way to make music. I remember there was another part-time job I had which set me up for doing that. Like I was determined to get a computer so that I could record myself at home, so I could have some sort of autonomy. At that time, it felt really revolutionary. At that time, music software evolved to a point where you felt that on a computer you could buy and set up in your own house, suddenly you could operate like a studio could, like a studio you'd spend hundreds of pounds a day on. And that felt really revolutionary at the time. And so that became my big goal. And to do that, I had this job. This is when I was back studying again. Like I got a job for this restaurant called Mother India in Glasgow. It's still, I was going to say, the greatest Indian restaurant north of the border, but it might be the greatest Indian restaurant north of Lahore. I think it's a great Indian restaurant. I love it. And the guys that run it, I'm still friends with the guys there, like Munir and Asif. They're really, really good guys. And
Brilliant.
Anyway, I worked. I had a Fiat Panda at the time. Talking about like that was the level of car I had then, and I had a 750cc engine, and I used to get £1 of curry, and so and whatever tips I could get. So I saved up. I must have delivered about 1,200 curries to get the computer, because that's how much it was in the end. But I was serious about it then, like and getting the software and cracked software at the time. I hate to say it, but like it was.
We won't tell the police.
Yeah. Don't tell the cops. Yeah. But yeah, I was serious about learning about it and how it would work, and just as serious then as I am now.
It's brilliant, because I wonder if that's the gem, like that's the kernel that has made this new record coming out now, The Human Fear. There's so much energy, and there's a lot of lightness in it. It's fun. It's a really fun record, and it's deep. It's got a lot of good groove in it. That is one hell of a job, to be able to keep that kernel of something that makes you feel excited about picking up a guitar or playing an instrument and sitting down and writing lyrics, or thinking about it when you're driving somewhere, or humming something to yourself. I mean, is that something that you feel like you've had to kind of work on, or kind of have there been moments where maybe you've lost it for a bit, that you had to get it back?
That's interesting you say that. Like I think it's essential that it stays a joy. Like, why do you pick up a guitar or play your instrument, whatever it is, or want to record and make music in the first place? It's because it gives you a buzz, because it makes you excited, because it's a fun thing to do with your pals. It's a social activity. You want to hang out with your mates and like make some tunes together. You get a reward from it that you couldn't get from anything else in life, and you feel driven to do it. And also there is that urge within you to do it that's kind of irrepressible, and you have to keep that alive. And I think more than anything, you have to remember that it's not a job. It's not your job. The job is the thing that you do because you have to get the money to pay the rent and to pay for the food on the table and to give you the time to do the thing that you love. This is the thing that you love. The fact that it's bringing in some money, yeah, that's magic. That's great. And there are other things that you might have to do associated with it that might not be so much fun, that get you the money in the long run. Like when you're having to get up at 5 a.m. to catch a flight so you can get somewhere to do a radio show or something like that. That might not be as much fun, but yeah, that gives you the financial freedom to do the thing that you do enjoy. And I think it's just that simple of just maintaining that perspective and seeing that it can be, or that it should be, a buzz and a thrill. And friendship groups evolve, and sometimes it stops being fun. You know, I've been in various other bands over the years and played with various people, and sometimes it would be great, then suddenly it wouldn't be great. And you have to be honest with yourself and say, oh yeah, you know what, this isn't what it was. We have to change this. And but then that allows you the chance to sort of like reassess and kind of go, right, what is it that I want to do that is going to be fun now, and find that.
Yeah. And by that point, you know the most that you've ever known, hopefully, so if you start something new, you're starting from a place of more understanding.
Yeah, actually understanding, that's the key, isn't it? Because like defeats, you know, like we all face various defeats, like various moments of darkness in our lives where we feel that we've been a bit beat. We feel the circumstances have knocked us down. But rather than feeling beat by that, rather than feeling destroyed by that, you have to have that word which you said, which is understanding. Those experiences give us the knowledge to then move on to do something else that's maybe a wee bit better than the last time, or more suited to giving you the reward that you want from it. Mm-hmm. And I think it's key as well to understand that if you go for the financial reward, you'll probably never get it. You know, I think the financial reward comes kind of as a secondary thing. If you're making something that's good and something that brings you joy and brings other people joy, then some finances might come with it at some point. But if you're doing it with a motivation of getting some dosh, then it's probably going to sound like that. And nobody wants to hear that, do they?
This is your first record since 2018. You've produced or had a hand in producing some great sounding records over the last few years. Los Bichos, big fan of them.
Ah, yeah.
Do you find that do you find that collaborating, creating with those bands, with those people, does that give you a spark? And does it also, do you learn from artists who have maybe formed in the last 5-10 years?
Yeah, I'm you know, when I was in the 90s, when I was putting on bands, I was putting on like at least 8 bands a week, like every week, and seeing like hundreds of bands with it. I've always been curious. I love hearing other people's creativity, and I find it very inspiring to see somebody with a new perspective. Like to go into the studio with other musicians that you respect as a producer, that's a great experience. I loved working with Los Bichos and with RM Hubbard and with Citizens and with the Cribs. You know, like they were great experiences, and I definitely learned a lot from them. I think whenever you collaborate with another musician, you always learn something. Like when I collaborated with the Mail Brothers from Sparks, I definitely learned from them as well. And you always absorb something new because nobody comes to music with the same perspective. Everybody has a different approach. Yeah. And every time you collaborate with another musician, you gain some insight because you see a little of their perspective, which always broadens your own, which is very enriching. So I love that. And I am so curious. I still love going to gigs. I still love seeing new bands. When I was back in London for a couple of days, and I saw there's a band called Home Counties. Have you come across those guys?
I have, yeah, they're great.
What a great band. Like I heard them live for the first time. I was like, oh yeah, this is fantastic. Like I love this. This is my kind of thing. This is the energy that I like to get from a gig. And then the night before I went down to see an Austrian band who they're well known in German-speaking countries, but maybe not so much in Britain, called Bilderbuch. And again, yeah, what a great experience. I like to be inspired by new things as well. Still,
Franz Ferdinand just covered a Chapel Roan track as well, and Made of Veil.
She's great, isn't she? She's yeah. So like when you do these sessions, like we were doing the sofa session for Joe Wiley, and quite often when you do these sessions, they ask you if you'll do a cover of a contemporary song. And so we sort of sat amongst ourselves, said, okay, what do you find exciting at the moment? And we all love Chapel Roan. And so we said, yeah, let's do that. And it's a great song, you know, what a cool song to do. And I enjoy doing covers from time to time because I think, again, it's like collaborating with another musician. You see a different perspective on songwriting, but also you learn something about yourself because you try and take that song and make it sound like it's one of yours.
Yeah.
And when you do that, you have to learn, you have to know yourself a little bit more to be able to do that. And so it's a good experience, you know.
I often think it's like going to your pal's bedroom when you're a teenager and being like, oh, I like the way this is set up, and then running home and like rearranging your own bedroom.
Yes, it is. You know, you're totally right. Yeah. You do. You get a different perspective. Bob told me about something interesting the other day. I'd never heard about this before, but apparently, when Jack White gets a new band together, he will sit and they will do covers. They will just play before he writes anything for the band. They'll just do covers until they work out what their sound is, what their identity is as a set of people working together. And I love that. It was kind of like that for us at the beginning as well. Before we did any Franz Ferdinand songs, we tried to do a couple of covers. We tried to cover a Fall song and a Spark song, but couldn't play either of them particularly well, and started to write our own instead.
I have to ask, what are your most memorable moments of being with Sparks? Were there any days or any conversations that you feel like you'll always remember?
You know, it was fascinating being in a room with those older guys and their experiences of growing up in LA. And I remember them talking, like I remember Ron talking about going down to Sunset Strip and seeing Love and seeing the Doors playing, and that was pretty cool. That was pretty cool having that. And like listening to the Beach Boys when he was a kid and stuff like that, you know. But yeah, just seeing the perspective. I always find it interesting to discover the perspective of other musicians, like what their formative experiences were growing up, and how it made them who they are. Because sometimes it can be quite surprising, you know. Like I didn't think they would necessarily be into that sort of thing, but yeah, they were. And also, Sparks, in my mind, they have such a European identity. But when you actually meet them, you realize like how very Los Angeles they are. They are very, very Los Angeles in their mentality, but less in a Los Angeles music scene sort of way, more in a Los Angeles Hollywood sort of sense. They're very much from the movie industry tradition rather than the music industry tradition. I'm
with you. You know, I think all of us have personalities, and I actually think that with all this, we're all looking at the same screens, and when something goes viral, or, you know, we're all looking at these same things all the time, it feels like. I feel like it's a bit of a battle now to keep our personalities and remember that personalities are just so important, and just it's such parental advice, isn't it? But just like try and like think about who you are, like what do you like, you know, and try and be the most you can be.
I totally agree, and especially in the age of the ease of correction within DAWs, you know, like computer based like recording.
Right. Yeah.
It's so easy to make everything sound absolutely perfect, but usually when you do that, you're removing so much of the personality.
Yeah.
You know, like when you hear that perfectly auto-tuned vocal, there's very little of the actual character that sang it in the first place left. And I think learning to embrace the flaws is a very important and powerful part of the creative process.
I think everyone's kind of had a few of those days, or I mean, I've had a lot of them. Those days where you just think, fuck, if I get to the end of today, then everything's going to be all right. You know, maybe you fucked up at work. Maybe you've smashed something that was really expensive. You've pissed off your boss. You've pissed off loads of people. You know, it doesn't have to be pissing off people, but have you had any of those days where you think, oh, fuck, that was a day I'd rather forget. And now here I am asking you to regale it.
Yes, definitely. I remember. It's funny. It's sometimes these things can be cumulative as well. It can be like lots of trivial little things that will go wrong, and before long you feel, you feel like it's just weighing down on you, and you don't know how you can possibly continue, you know, with it all. Never mind with just the job, getting to the end of the day. And that's really what was in my mind when I was writing this song, Audacious. Like what's the response you have when you feel like that, when you feel defeated by the circumstances of life? And I guess I was feeling that when I wrote it, and I thought, God damn, you know what I'm just going to do something really audacious. I'm going to be bold and like kind of like, rather than let it defeat me, I'm going to kind of just go, damn it all. Like I'm just going to go fucking out there and be as audacious as I possibly can be. Right. But it's only when you were describing, there was the hypothetical situation, one very distinct memory came into my mind. When I was 21, I had a job working in a factory in Clydebank that made circuit breakers, like, you know, a bit like a fuse box kind of circuit breaker, but not the little ones that you get in domestic houses. Like it was for huge factories. So these circuit breakers, it would be the size of a transit van, you know, like these huge things. Anyway, we had this one piece of machinery that I had to operate. It was like a die, and it was like for pressing out pieces of metal that would like go into this. And it was a really expensive die to make. Like the machine was, it cost something like 20,000 quid for this machine. And my job was, I had to press these buttons, and it had to be in a particular order. I had to go 1, 2, 3, then 2 again, something like that. And if I didn't do it in exactly the right order, it would fuck the die. And it was just the same thing repeated again and again and again. I would go 1, 2, 3, 2. And then once I went 1, 2, 3, 1. And yeah, 20,000 quid's worth of industrial dye was suddenly scrap metal. And yeah, that definitely felt like one of those days. You know, one of those days where everybody hates you because you've messed up so badly. The weight of that responsibility was not a good one. But hey, they ended, and eventually I ended up here on a podcast telling you about it.
And also, that's what business insurance is for.
That's what I should have said to them at the time. All I could actually think of was, I'm sorry.
So there was Alex Kapranos of Franz Ferdinand here on 101 Part-Time Jobs. Their new record, The Human Fear, is out tomorrow. And I hope you enjoyed that chat. If you did, make sure you follow us on Instagram, where we're posting a lot more and more these days. And subscribe to us on Apple and Spotify. We're also doing more videos on YouTube. We'll be back next week with episodes with Anna B. Savage and Vashti Bunyan. And the week after, we'll be hearing from Stuart Braithwaite of Mogwai, Ditz, and Greg Freeman. See you then.
101 Part-Time Jobs is hosted by Giles Bidder and produced by me, Olivia Swash. This has been a Mighty Moon Media production.